Next up, we have a couple of close friends of BlockDown. They've been with us several times. In fact, the gentleman of this fireside chat has already spoken 2 or 3 times here. Please put your hands together for Christina Corner and Dylan Dudney talking about metaverse and equality within this ecosystem.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. How do you do today? Oh gosh, so much space.
It's very nice. When we walk out like that, I almost feel like it's like
you can walk and I can
like
sit.
Wrestling, like a wrestling thing.
Okay, metaverse. Have you ever heard this word? I'm joking.
Is that the first question? Yes.
Yes. Okay, I guess my first question would be, why now? Why now everyone is talking about metaverse, even though, well, we've all read science fiction novels where this idea of parallel space where we can be happier and like construct our lives according to some different rules that are not yet damaged by the reality and politics and economics. Why are we actually living it now, this metaverse obsession?
Yeah, I think there's like a element of utopianism that permeates narratives around the metaverse, and typically throughout history, narratives around technologies coming like into the popular consciousness. So, you know, there's always this sort of like two-sided narrative. You know, on one side it's like it's terrible, and this has been true for, you know, blockchain in general. You know, in the beginning, for example, of Bitcoin, it was like all drugs and criminals, but at the same time, it was like, you know, money for the stateless, like internet money for the world, and make things, you know, free. So these two things kind of like typically coexist when new technologies come into the fray in society. When it comes to metaverse, I think we all have kind of like. And I hope my answer is not too long, but I think we all have a sense that that like it's possible, and it's like kind of like close to our grasp. Some of these technologies. We've seen films like, you know, Ready Player One is referenced a lot in crypto circles. Obviously, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, you know, have changed their, you know, name to Meta to kind of like enter this narrative, but I actually see metaverse as, in a way, as like another term for a decentralized internet, and that you know, Facebook going to Meta was almost like a capitulation or an acknowledgement that the next phase of the internet, like the next evolution of everything, is going to be more sort of like P2P oriented and decentralized.
Okay, next question. Why do you think there is a fire behind us?
Because it's a fireside chat, obviously.
I feel.
We have to be by the side of the fire. Are you getting hot?
Okay. The interaction between these two worlds is still not very clear. I mean, how do you see this? How do you envision this interaction of reality and meta reality, let's say, within the next couple of years? What will it mean exactly for us as human beings, for the community that is now within blockchain, but also for the mainstream audience who is now also starting hearing about metaverse, NFTs, Web3, etc.?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity here.
Sorry, it's my alarm.
It's okay, you can take that if you like. No, I'm just kidding. I think there's a huge opportunity here where we can, you know, if indeed we have these sort of decentralized rails, and if indeed it becomes a sort of really P2P oriented infrastructure surrounding sort of this new vision or new architecture of the internet that we're calling, you know, Web3 and metaverse have a lot of crossover, right? And I think they're almost in a similar kind of Venn diagram. And I think that you know, if indeed all these things come to pass, it's great. But if, you know, we have a bunch of new people entering and adopting and getting into the metaverse, and they don't necessarily care about the foundations, the technical foundations behind it, that you know, for example, recently, you know, Meta, I think, released just completely tone deaf. Meta released, they're like, hey, we're gonna give, you know, 40, I can't remember, it was like, we're gonna give 40% to creators. What do you think of that? And it's like, you know, in their head, it's like really good, but for people who are, you know, kind of crypto native, we're like, hell no, that's horrible. So it's going to be very important when these, you know, these next waves of people are coming in, that they're exposed to these narratives. So it's almost incumbent upon us as individuals who have a philosophical alignment with, you know, this ideas of equitability, ideas of a fairer vision of the future through better, you know, decentralized architecture. Like, we need to be telling people, you know, like, it's cool that Facebook turned into Meta, but listen, you know, maybe you should try this, like, other, you know, platform, because it's actually, like, is synonymous with what in fact may be a substantive change in your future life.
But this brings us to this discussion, what is mainstream and non-mainstream adoption? Because, well, when Facebook, it was yet Facebook started, it was an additional value for those who spent their times on web, and it was something that had really an interesting value. Right now, Facebook is full of bullshit, and everyone who has 5 minutes of leisure expresses their opinions on everything, pandemics, politics, whatever. This is not the initial mission of Web2 platforms like Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, my mother would disagree with you. She is still on Facebook and posts, you know, pictures of me in my childhood, constantly. But this is maybe
also cats and food, right?
cat. So, but yeah, I mean, I like in the early days of Facebook, it was actually, I loved Facebook, like very early days. But yeah, I mean, it's become something. I actually lost track of the actual question in that one.
Won't we see the same, you know, cats, food, and weird thoughts in metaverse? Don't you?
Yeah.
Aren't you afraid that it will become populated by those who do not use metaverse for making this world better, but who want this additional platform to demonstrate that they have a big dick?
Yeah. So this is like. I don't think the problems of the real world or the previous problems that we've seen in I guess, whatever race to the bottom that we encounter as a result of just humans interacting with one another it's probably not going to just go away forever. But I think that if we find, so this is something that we're kind of like working on a little bit with Project Kyla Network, which I'm also in front of. But you know, how do we validate like data? How do we get a sense of if data or things that we report, like even Cointelegraph, like, you know, how do we know that that's in fact like true reporting? In the past, we had this like really interesting kind of like setup where we had, you know, these centralized news sources, but there was this real like sense of professional journalistic integrity, and then that sort of changed over time, and there were still problems with that. Like there were still, you know, like wealthy people buying newspapers and things like that still happened, but there was this sort of like buffer or cushion, I think, you know, from like
Rich people buying Twitter. Yeah,
rich people buying Twitter. That's happening now, but I think something that happened in the years of like, I couldn't necessarily place it, but let's just say in the most of the 20th century was that we had lots of people who had like, and you know, this is something as, you know, editor of Cointelegraph that, you know, like you've got this like journalistic integrity, but that journalistic integrity started to like, I think, wane as the other sort of like source, like the other methods by which people came to information changed, and you know, they came in the form of Facebook posts and crap like that. And so maybe, yeah, I don't know if you want to riff off that.
That's a great point, honestly.
Yeah.
And with this democratic instruments, so many news makers started thinking that real news are those that are coming from their platforms, not from journalistic, damaged reputational media outlets. And this is catastrophe.
Yeah, like
Because this freedom of expression in the end brings more chaos than standardized rules of traditional ethics that has been created by generations of professionals.
yeah, and then you get into this issue of like, you know, would something like Watergate have the same resonance as it would today? I mean, arguably there were just as many sort of like big scandals when, you know, when Trump was in office in the United States. I mean, than Watergate. Yet, it's just like meh. It's just, it becomes part of this like news cycle. So I think, anyway, I don't know how this gets back to metaverse, but I think, I guess like it goes back to your original question of like, will things necessarily get better? I think that they don't necessarily get better by virtue of, you know, a change in human psychology and behavior, but to the extent that we've been kind of, as a society, skewed by some of these technologies, and this is talked about extensively, I think, you know, in documentaries like The Social Dilemma, you know, to the extent that we can kind of like change these media sources to something that is a more, I just expect that when we have a more self-custodied or decentralized like kind of infrastructure to handle these to handle these platforms, and I expect that there's going to be like maybe less special interest involved, and kind of more of an accurate depiction of what the, you know, preponderance or majority of people around the world think about a certain subject. Because maybe you know, I think it'd be really cool to do data validations, like call like thousands of, in Kylan network, for example, we want to call thousands of local election result APIs as sort of like this unbiased benchmark for a federal election result. So it's not like the politician can dispute, you know, or Fox News can dispute what the election result is, because in fact you have all these nodes running and they don't even know that there's going to be a federal election because they're just nodes. It's like a matter of natural law that they are calling, you know.
Yeah, but once Fox News have the studio and presence in metaverse, they will have the same appeal, no?
Okay, yeah, that's true. But if we can maybe, like if just like we had ultimately like this belief in kind of like journalistic integrity, and maybe we'll have a belief in sort of like the integrity of blockchain processes to you know, maybe have a better sense of like what truth may be. And
so you do not expect metaversal wars?
Actually, I think it's a good idea to have metaversal wars. We should have metaversal wars
instead of real ones.
Instead of, you know, kinetic or real wars. I think that would be awesome if there was Ukraine in the sandbox rather than in the real world, and Russia in the sandbox rather than in the real world. Like, let it all play out there instead of real people's lives being hurt. Though this is interesting to consider, right? Like could you want to create a context where ultimately, I guess there are wars in metaversal contexts, because you could, you know, in the same way, like you could start to think about monopolizing or buying up certain sections of land, or, you know, I guess there's sort of like warlike activity in any like economic or capitalistic kind of like situations. Maybe, you know, like BlackRock and Luna.
Luna.
Rumor.
Bye, Luna.
Sorry, we're probably off tangent, or we're off subject, off topic here.
Okay, well, we talked about this human behavior in metaverse. What about the real world? The more we are entering the metaversal space, do you think the real world has a potential to become better or worse, or it will just stay the same?
My hope is that the real world will become better. Part part of that has to do with like resourcing and centralization of.
Hope or belief?
Well, that's, yeah, I believe. I believe, in fact, because if if we're able to kind of like, if we're able to catch, or capture some of the value that's currently being captured, and this is something I talked about before, but like, if indeed, there's a dollar value attached to each one of us living our lives, right? Which is the case. I mean, us just living our lives on, the internet creates value for many, well, not many, but many people through shareholders and corporations. But like, there's a handful of big companies, like called the FANG companies, I guess. But if we can get some of that value back through architecting a new vision of the entire internet, which is, I think this is at the heart of, metaverse and Web3. I think Web3 is much more of a reality than metaverse right now, or much more of a near-term future for us than everybody spending like 8 or 10 hours of their day in a virtual environment, at least by that definition of the metaverse. But I think it will get better if we can capture some of that value back. If if some of the ethos of crypto, is maintained toward sort of like equitability, personal responsibility, because it's a completely different shift of psychology to say, no, I'm not gonna put my money in the bank, and possibly if I lose my card, right? And we can imagine in this scenario, your card is like your private keys, like, then I can go to the bank and I can ask them to get a new card and blah, blah, blah. It's very convenient, and there's a lot of hand-holding in that process. But we know that over time, banks have kind of, used us, I guess. And I think, I said this before, it's like, there's a total shift in psychology, because you need to have individuals take like a little bit more personal responsibility over what they're doing, but there's tremendous benefits by doing that, because and especially if we do it as a society, and if we try to inculcate those values among our friends and our family, to say, hey, like, would a fair vision of the internet, and the internet is the world, the internet is our lives, like it's one and the same. We live in symbiosis with these technologies. They're extensions, they're cognitive processes that we use. Like, I'm not as smart as many, as my mom thinks I am. I just have a smartphone, and I can pull up information whenever I want. But yeah, I think it's time for the world to evolve, and we're starting to lay the technical foundations for a lot of that. And again, I just would support the notion that we have to be careful about how all this plays out, and really take individual responsibility about spreading that message. And yeah, but sorry, I know you probably want another question, but I think when the first stories come out of people having like really like significant personal capitalizations as a result of self-custodying their data, like they're going to start to become more cognizant about and more conscious about what they're doing, right? So if my friend Jack is like, hey man, like, because I was on this, in doing this and on this, I got like $500 this year, and for many people that's impactful, or and like every month, all I did was I uploaded my genomic data, like and I get, and researchers are accessing this, and I'm getting like $5 to my crypto wallet, like automatically. It's like, once those first stories start coming out in the media, I think in fact that the change in people's orientation is going to be like extremely rapid. People are going to start like getting off of anything where they don't feel they are going to make like that will have the highest impact in terms of like them getting more resources than they would through some sort of like more hand-holding or platform-based context.
Okay, I think it's time to
Sorry.
tell the folks what you are doing in this space. Can you explain what you are doing, what your project is doing, without using a word, NFT, metaverse, F word? Well, yes, please.
Yeah, we're essentially, like, for NFT3, we're essentially trying to build the context for a new concept around identity. We're calling meta identity. We hope we're the ones to do it, but there are many really great minds and people that are working on this side of the issue, I guess. And so the idea is you have to have a common referent at a technical layer. You have to have common referent across all these different contexts. Whether we're talking about Web 2 or Web 3, and there's going to exist a long period of time where Web 2 and Web 3 are interrelating, and we need to have, in the sense that, like, Web 2 is all about platform, right? And Web 3 is all about people, and we're going to need to have a way to, sure, we can start to think about self-custodying data, and our chief advisor Evan McMullen, who runs Disco.xyz, is working on this right now, and thank God for her, because she's really smart and she's figured out the self-custody of data thing. I think they're working on it right now, but we want to work on how do we sort of like tag people. How do we, one of our investors likened this to, cookies for people, right? But instead of like you being creepily tracked by, Facebook, or your metadata being polished and sold, you're going to have that coming back to you personally. This is the vision of decentralized identity and of NFT3, without going into like super big detail about it. But yeah, I did say NFT because it's in the name.
So how do you tag people in digital world? How do you create this identity, still allowing people to be, I don't know, cats in metaverse or astronauts or whatever they want to be?
Yeah, great question. So it's, a decentralized identifier is just like a string of numbers. It's not, it doesn't, like, you can be a cat in the metaverse, you can be a dragon, you can be anything you want in the metaverse. So a Web3 identity will just map these, potentially you could map these qualities to a decentralized identifier. I don't know if you necessarily want to, well, maybe you would. I don't know how it's all going to play out, but it's not as much a way to, it's providing the context for people to be able to accrue different qualities, parameters, indicators, attestations, off-chain or on-chain to their decentralized identifier. So you can think about it, it's like my decentralized identifier is like a backpack, and I travel around, I'm able to put stuff in it, and if somebody asks me, are you good enough to, or do you have this, or I can be like, okay, I pulled this out of my backpack. So in Metaverse 1, I defeated the legendary dragon, because Metaverse 2 wants to know if I defeated the legendary dragon, because they're like, yo, we want you in Metaverse 2 because we heard you defeated the legendary dragon. Are you going to come join us? I mean, this is it may seem like a trite example, but there are other examples that may be more impactful. For example, I've built up a number of parameters around, or I've done a number of things that would be, we can spit out some sort of scoring about that, and you can apply for better credit terms or something like that. I do expect that if you're able to get a sense of credit risk or worthiness through associating different aspects of identity, including off-chain attestations, like maybe there are interesting or meaningful things that you can associate with your NFT3 did, where, like, say for example, in addition to having all these interesting parameters, like I have a lot of Ether in my wallet, I own a CryptoPunk, or whatever, or I also have an attestation from Harvard that I'm in the I'm in their medical program, and therefore I might get
Online
interesting
program, obviously.
online program.
So
maybe.
what real characteristics stay there within your digital identity, something from your real life?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, no, I mean, it could even be, I see what you're saying, so it's like, yeah.
Otherwise, how can you justify that it's you doing this, all these things online, and it's not your partner or a bot or whatever?
Yeah, I don't, so I think within the, like, within meta identity, I'd want it to remain an a pseudonymous kind of thing, right? I don't necessarily think people should expose, you know, it's up to them if they would like to, the same way if you expose your Ethereum wallet address and you say, hey, this is my Ethereum wallet address. There's a little bit more, I guess, like really maybe there's a little bit more to consider because, you know, you can start multiple, you know, you can create multiple addresses and things like that. But ultimately, it's going to be in the hands of the individual to consider how much security they want to put around, you know, whether or not they share their DID, right, or not, to other people. Like in terms of associating it with their real life identity, we can do KYC. Like the beauty of DIDs is you don't really have to put any personally identifiable information associated with the DID. In fact, like there's no sense of it.
So you can't create multiple personalities in metaverse?
I mean, you could. You could. So it remains to be seen how this is going to play out. Will people, if you know, first, are we right about DIDs as a standard? That remains to be seen because they haven't been adopted massively. I mean, that's just so we could. The basic thesis, our basic thesis could be wrong, right? I mean, but as you know, as people working on the fringes of technology, this is the chance you take. But obviously, I wouldn't be spending this much effort and time if I thought we were wrong. I don't think we are. I think the technical standard of decentralized identifiers is unassailable in addition to verifiable credential attestations, which work with them. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, yeah, you could create multiple DIDs, but what's important is sort of like the standard that, so there are like 95 different DID methods right now, and you know only a handful of them will end up becoming like dominant DID methods. Same thing like with ERC20 standards. So it's, you can kind of think about that analogously. So to the extent that one of these DID methods is adopted, hopefully it's NFT3 DID, then that's actually going to help it become a standard. Now there could be different projects that want to get people into DIDs, you know, and get them to adopt them.
DIDs.
Yeah. Pardon?
DIDs.
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 DIDs, yeah.
D-I-D. Actually, I've heard deeds before, like
deeds?
D-E-E-D.
Yeah.
As well. It's an interesting naming of your product, like D.
Yeah, I might be the only one who says DIDs. So we're at a foundational. It's like back in 2011 when people were like, so Bitcoin or blockchain? Which one? Which should we talk about? Bitcoin or blockchain? And it ended up being, you know, Bitcoin was just part of blockchain.
No, Bitcoin is bad. Blockchain is good. Come on.
Yeah, or there was that too. Yeah, you know about all this, right? And so it's like, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe my pronunciation of the term will be like, will go out of fashion.
It's fine. It's my ears.
Okay.
Okay. Let's get back to the social politics that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Like in real life, one of the main part of your passport identity is your nationality, right? How do you see this concept being relevant in metaverse, in digital space? I mean, of course, it won't be like sovereign states, but what is your main identification in terms of the social politics within this ecosystem? Is it that you are pro-Bitcoin and pro-Ether, or is it more about something else? I don't know, about your education, about your political values, whatever.
So I think we're confronting a very interesting time to be like a nation state. at this point in history, because nation states provided a lot of value for people. Part of the whole history of the world, at least in relatively modern times, is at least since the advent of money, is any like empire is sort of seeking this holy grail. Holy grail is having the reserve currency, because if you have the reserve currency, then you can basically set the terms for trading throughout the world. So through the machinery of history and how things went down with World War II, it ended up becoming, and World War I, it ended up becoming the United States, having this reserve currency, which was removed from the British Empire, sort of like over to the American Empire, and before that it was like the Dutch Empire. So this is like, or Dutch East, but so it's like, what happens if, because this world, like our socio-political systems and power is like really, really wrapped up in countries and nation states attempting to get to the holy grail of reserve currency. And what happens if indeed stateless money becomes a thing, or if I've written about this before about what if Bitcoin becomes the global reserve currency? Now the nature of the game could essentially be changed, because you don't have nation states individually having sort of like warlike activities to get more dominance, or to like eventually get to the reserve currency. Maybe they just start buying like Bitcoin, so that process becomes a little bit decentralized. Could be interesting to see how that plays out. I think we're gonna have, just going back to like the earlier point, like we're still gonna have all the same problems, because we're still the same old boring humans who do the same old petty things, and also great things.
Old boring, dangerous humans.
Yeah, and dangerous humans. But I think that if I think that if we successfully decentralize the internet, it's a future really worth getting excited about, at the individual level as well as at other levels of society. And yeah, I guess, is that satisfactory, or is that land?
Is it satisfactory?
Okay.
You're
Have we
part
run out of questions?
1 second of
You
my...
got this.
Education. I think it's key also, because we are now talking about a very small community. We're still a very small community. Once we become mainstream, we'll have much more headaches if we do not educate this mainstream community that is coming. You are part of different expert clubs. You just joined Cointelegraph Innovation Circle.
I love it, by the way.
So,
yeah.
How do you consider your mission there, in terms of educating masses, and how actually we as a community can do in order to ensure that our future, mainstream future, will be the best imagined ever, and not just another disaster in terms of another platform for badasses to use their power and influence in their personal interests and to their personal benefits.
That's tough. I'm not sure of the way that we're going to change aspects of any aspects of human desires, psychology, etc. So the speculative impulse, as we know in crypto, is extremely strong, and everybody in the room is lying if they say they got in it for the tech. Okay, you're all a bunch of liars. You did not get in it for the tech. Okay, not initially at least. I don't know. Maybe it might not be fair to you. Maybe there's like one or two that like straight up got into it for the tech. But I think the overwhelming majority of us initially were like, oh, there could be a financial opportunity here, right? Like,
when Lambo.
Yeah, when Lambo, and I think that's okay. It's there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that like you're not gonna. So anyway, that's just exemplary of like the.
It's not bad at all. Actually, if everyone is rich, we have much more opportunities. The
Yeah.
question is how then you will spend this money.
Well, okay, so it's not like it's a bit of a zero-sum game, capitalism. Like, so to some extent, it's arguable. You know, if I'm getting something, then someone else is not getting something. I think that a lot of us kind of like don't really connect up with that fact because it's not like we have infinite resources on the earth. However, we do have infinite imagination, and to the extent that we can keep expanding the terms of what we do, or keep creating new areas for people to kind of like expand and areas where things become more efficient, then it's like in that imagining is the locus of hope for humanity, because that's the only way. It's like we need to create more area for humans to do what humans do, which is to like be imaginative, build interesting tools that increasingly become crazily specialized, like Web3 identity in the metaverse. Like nobody 100 years ago was thinking of, these are interesting technologies, right, that develop. And I don't know if that answers that, but that's my view on it, kind of in a nutshell.
Well, can you formulate it as an advice to all the people here who are working in the space and who are also communicating with those who have no idea what is Web3, what is metaverse, what is NFT, what is, well, maybe they've heard, oh, it's Bitcoin. Yeah, okay, I know what is Bitcoin. Yeah. I can get rich quickly, right? This is what Bitcoin is. How should we communicate with those people who have no idea yet what we're bringing on the table? How we should initiate them to the space in order to make it as sustainable and bringing better world to the world?
Yeah, I guess you asked about education. Well, I mean, technically, I could throw that back at you because you are the editor-in-chief of Cointelegraph, so you probably have more of a platform to educate than anyone. But in my view, I think it's like run stories about what's really kind of like philosophically engaging, but I mean that's on your end, I guess. But is this narrative, is this narrative appealing to people? I hope that it is. It's not as, it's like a broader narrative. It's not something that's happening in a news cycle, but it's worth considering and worth talking about.
I totally agree, and we definitely try to angle and frame our content to make it as relatable as possible to the people. But well, media publications is sort of a metaverse as well. I mean, you read something on the newspaper, then you close it, and then you go live your life. So in my personal opinion, communications and conversations with your family, friends, your sport fellows, etc., has much more appeal and potential influence than any media article.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, so I guess maybe that's sort of like the answer is you have to, if you truly sort of buy in and have conviction around. This is like probably what has happened with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general over time as it's grown. Is these stories are told to friends and family, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody, well, maybe not everybody, but many people have a story about like. And I've heard these stories as I've been here at BlockDown of like, hey, yeah, okay, like this is how I got into Bitcoin. My friend told me about it, and I thought, okay, like I formed a conviction around it. I think this is really an important technology, and so we got the financial use case, and I think that's really the foundation is there. It's pretty. It's like mature, right? Like it's almost mature, and now we need to start. Like really banging down the doors of like the next evolution of all of this is what happens beyond the financial use case. What happens to the human use case, right, of blockchain. And the human use case of blockchain is in this context at least, is like, how do we live, how do we make sure that we're living, or we're extolling the virtues of like a truly decentralized internet, which I think is tantamount to like the term Web3.
What does your mother think about this?
Sorry?
What does your mother think about this? Rather,
My
other
mom?
than that you're smart, but about the space.
I don't know. You know, like I bounced around a lot in my early life, and I think they're just happy that I'm, you know, not trying to start, you know, a rock band or not trying to become a painter or something like that.
Rock band is even worse than Bitcoin, right?
No, actually, Bitcoin was worse than a rock band in the early days because people were like associated with drugs and criminals. So.
And rock band is only alcohol, or?
Oh yeah, actually, you got a good point there.
And why alcohol is that better than drugs? I've never understood that in the end.
I mean, I don't touch that stuff anymore, so I wouldn't know. I'm just,
lobby ski, okay.
Yeah, but no, you know, like I think they're like the older generation is fascinated by this, right? And as they should be. It's and if they
really, I think that at least some of these older generations are. Oh my gosh, they are all spending their lives in their phones. They are forgetting about real world.
It's so that's really interesting because I remember my mom telling me, get off your phone, right? This is only like 6-7 years ago. And now she's literally, you know, she picks me up at the airport in Chicago where she lives, and she's like got her phone like this, and she's like got her phone like this, and you know, and I'm like, we're gonna die. You can't be doing this. And Mom, if you're watching, I just don't be offended. No, it just, you know, it's when we form these relationships with technologies, they take us in places that, you know, we may not expect, and you know, we are addicted. I think extremely addicted to our phones. It's something that we probably don't look in the mirror enough about as a global society. I certainly don't. I'm addicted. Like, I'm a Telegram junkie.
Okay.
I'm like.
On this positive note.
Yeah. Are we done? Oh, time's up. Okay. Thanks for coming to the talk, guys. Yeah.
Thank you.